Well, good morning. My name is Amy Taplata Church, and kicking off this webinar today, a special webinar for QSSBs and folks at USB that are curious about how the soy industry can communicate and use some new resources and knowledge that we have about consumer attitudes to really help share the story and the benefits of gene editing as part of our journey to build acceptance in this exciting new technology. So along with me today is my colleague, Jana McGuire, and we're going to hear from Jana toward the end of the webinar just about, and she'll actually show some of these new resources that will be available to you and your colleagues across US Soy. So a few logistical questions. We are in webinar mode. We invite your questions. You could submit those or any comments, submit those through the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And also we are recording this and can make it available if others could not join in today. So let's get started. So we know that gene editing can bring tremendous benefit, and that goes outside of the soybean fields. But gene editing applications are being developed kind of across human health, medicine, and agriculture and food production. So gene editing has this really tremendous benefit in terms of increasing soy utilization, sustainability, agronomy practices and production, and human health. Our ability to use gene editing really hinges on public acceptance, as with any new innovation or tool. So these resources are part of a project that USB and the board of directors had approved for funding in fiscal year 21, all about how US soy can help to build acceptance in this exciting new technology. So today we're going to share some consumer research, what we know about US consumer attitudes around gene editing. We'll share some communication tools and trainings that have been completed as part of this project. A new gene editing video today will be the premiere. You're the first audience to see it. An infographic with a new soy star and some social media content and plans to amplify and share these resources. So the question we want to answer today simply is, how is USB providing leadership to earn trust in gene editing? So there's an organization that's been working since 2016 to build global acceptance and support for gene editing when it's used responsibly in agriculture and food. That coalition is facilitated by the Center for Food Integrity and has two main work streams. One being effective engagement, the communications, the outreach that we're going to talk about today, and the other being responsible use guidelines. And those responsible use guidelines you'll be hearing more about in fiscal year 22. So sneak peek alert on that. But we're so thrilled that USB provides leadership as a member of this gene editing coalition. And USB is represented by a director, Andy Scott from Texas, and a staff liaison, Emily Dussman. So just really excited about the continual support from US Soy and all these other partners that you see on the screen here. So one of the keys to success in building market acceptance will be that work not only across the supply chain, but also with other influencers, thought leaders at research institutions, and with the food system, because they can provide that ultimate acceptance as far as what goes on the shelf or put into ingredients and products or served in restaurants. So I flipped quickly past, but one of the first projects, and you might have seen this because it was launched in March, is a gene editing communication resource that was built around a resource that the coalition had done back in 2018 with recommendations about how we can effectively engage in a way that builds trust with the public. So this resource was updated earlier this year, made soy specific, with soy specific conversation starters, examples. So we invite you to download it at the website there if you have not already, and see how that can be put to use, whether it's in your own engagements in your states or across US soy, your communications and utilization of these resources we'll share today. So I wanted to first give a few highlights about what we've learned about how the public feels about gene editing. That communication resource was really built on a synthesis and analysis of research that we reviewed back in 2018. And this research was specific to attitudes around gene editing, and in some cases, biotech in food, agriculture, and in a few cases around human health. Most of the consumer research was conducted in the US, a few studies from Canada, and a few from Europe. And so you can see the really complete list of organizations that were so gracious to provide their research that we could review. Through this review and analysis, we found some very consistent themes for which formed the recommendations you'll see in the communication guide, and I'll share today. But one of the resounding messages is the time to engage is now. These are results from a national consumer study that was conducted by Iowa State researchers at the end of 2020 and published in January 2021. And this is very consistent with some survey that we just saw, actually, that was taken this summer. It's very consistent with information from research in early 2020 by the FMI Foundation and others. The time to engage is now. 41% of US consumers in this Iowa State survey said they had heard or read about gene edited foods. So flipping that the other way, 60% had not. It's a blank canvas. There's kind of this opening for us to create the narrative around the benefits of gene editing. In that Iowa State survey, 1/4 of the consumers participating said they care a fair or great deal about gene editing. So that's fabulous. And I'm mostly excited about the digital technologies, targeting, marketing channels that we have available to us to really identify and share those messages with the consumers that say they care a fair or great deal. And 1/3 of the consumers in this study rate their understanding as good to excellent, which is a great base, but also leaves that considerable opening to share more. We also looked at some work that was done, and this was by American Seed Trade Association, so specific to plant breeding, through some focus groups with consumers back in 2015. This is really foundational for us to understand as we communicate about gene editing. The average consumer has very limited, if any, knowledge that plant breeding even occurs. So there's not a base for the crop improvement that plant scientists, that soybean growers, and that all of us in production agriculture have every right to be so proud of. In those focus groups, some consumers had simply no knowledge that plants are bred or that crop improvement has been a thing. There's really limited knowledge about breeding methods that have been used for several decades, like conventional selection, mutagenesis. And I think most concerning to me is that most consumers are simply unaware of the environmental benefits that have been brought by modern crop production, simply in the efficiencies and the high productivity, and what that's done, in fact, to reduce our carbon footprint or to make more with less. And finally, consumers want to learn more. So this was work done by an industry company, and their work found that less than half said, I understand how gene editing works, but more than half said, I want to learn more about how it's being used in agriculture. So the time is now to talk about this opportunity. So now how do we leverage this very natural curiosity among the public and fill this knowledge gap so we can develop support for gene editing? So based on that synthesis of research, the team at CFI developed 5 effective communication approaches, kind of based on what we know about what it takes to earn trust among consumers. And today I'll walk through these 5 and provide some conversation starters to think about as you share content. The most important recommendation is to focus on the benefits and the values that are important to the public, that are important to the consumers. And yes, there are some differences from consumer to consumer in terms of what they find very compelling. But as we looked at those 15 or so different research projects and studies, most of those asked a question something like this: which of the following benefits are most important for agriculture to deliver through gene editing? And each of the studies had a slightly different list, and they had some more specific benefits and applications. But when we looked at those broadly, we found definite themes. So at the top of nearly every question were benefits around environmental stewardship. So whether that be, direct protection of natural resources, or around that sustainability and making more with less, fewer with fewer natural resources. Disease resistance, whether that be for humans, plants, or animals, ranks very high consistently. Any benefits around animal health or well-being, reduced suffering for animals, rank very high. So that's something to think about for our friends in animal agriculture. And then nutritional benefits also rank high as the consuming public is looking to make food choices, truly for our best health. So a great example is the high oleic soybean oil, which was in fact the first gene edited product commercially available. So as you move down the scale there, then you see that the lower placed were benefits that resonated the least with consumers across this research. I do want to make a call out there to feeding the world, which unfortunately, those exact words, feeding the world, continue to rank very low. But I see a great optimism in that the tide is changing a bit when we change those words and we talk about our responsibility to make healthy, affordable food available for all. So that concept of food security is growing, and I think has come stronger kind of through the pandemic with some of the supply chain shortages, and then we know some of the economic changes for families due to the pandemic. So when we reframe that as making healthy, safe food available, making enough healthy, safe food available, that's a message that will resonate. So simply said, and if you've talked with CFI before, you've probably heard something like this, but what we really need to do to earn trust is focus on benefits to consumers, to environment, and to plants and animals, not profit, yield, or increased efficiency. This is the results from research I mentioned earlier conducted by the FMI Foundation, also funding from American Farm Bureau Association, ASTA, American Seed Trade, and some others. It was peer reviewed with university researchers involved. And they did a very in-depth study on the benefits of gene editing and consumer acceptance when used in food. And they found when consumers are informed about the benefits of gene editing, they responded that they are significantly more likely to purchase gene editing foods. And there was also a tremendous increase in the market potential. We're aware also that FMI is conducting a phase 2 research around gene editing and looking forward to seeing that update and some additional detail. So here's a way that we can bring this forth. For example, in a media interview or a public situation, if we are asked, what is gene editing? It's really easy to get into a scientific explanation that includes lots of acronyms and big words, but we would recommend an answer something like this. Gene editing makes precise, intentional, and beneficial changes in the genetic material of plants and animals, which can improve health, nutrition, and environmental stewardship. So ending with those strong and compelling benefits. Also, we wanted to highlight some resources that we believe do a very good job. And one of those is Innovature at .com. They have an extensive set of resources around how gene editing is being used in plants, animals, microbes, and food production. Some great examples there, and we encourage you to leverage those. Our second recommendation is to lead with the human health connection. We have found through various different research points that the advancements in human medicine are really the strongest entry point into conversations about how we use gene editing in food and agriculture. And that's because, unfortunately, many of us personally know someone who is affected by a disease like cancer or sickle cell or a number of others where gene editing is being researched on the human side as a technology that can prevent or cure diseases. So making that personal connection first is indeed a strong entryway. This was from research done by the University of Wisconsin, and in a survey that they did, 1,600 people, 2/3 said they believe gene editing for human therapeutic purposes is acceptable. So how does this show up in a conversation? It's as simple as this. Gene editing shows great potential to cure or prevent disease in humans, and gene editing can also help plants and animals resist disease. One resource that we would point to you is on Best Food Facts, which is a consumer-facing platform that is facilitated by the Center for Food Integrity. There you will find a series of videos about CRISPR, which is one of the specific tools used and called gene editing. So there's actually 3 different videos. Here are folks that were featured in video 2, it is. And some of the approaches that we utilized in this video series, they were hosted by a popular digital influencer, Lynn Pfeiffer, of 365 Days of Baking and More. They featured not only a gene editing expert, Dr. Barangu at NC State, they also featured a farmer, a human medical researcher, and an advocate for gene editing in human medicine, who he himself was afflicted with sickle cell disease. And finally, a well-known researcher at the University of California, Berkeley, answering that question, how can CRISPR improve food? We were just tickled when we saw, with this video series, we had the opportunity to do pre and post testing of the consumer responses. And so for this specific video too, with those experts that I mentioned, comparing the pre and post viewing ratings, we found these results here on the screen. 64% said this information was credible. 63% were positive about the technology after viewing the video. What was most interesting to us is after viewing the video, when presented in this way, speaking about the benefits first in human health, there was a 15-point increase in support, up to 60% saying, I could support gene editing in food after watching this video. And again, you can find those videos on Best Food Facts. Our third recommendation is to talk about evolution, not revolution. And we've perhaps all seen the headlines, gene editing, the, technology of the decade, this breakthrough technology, pioneering research. And we scientists should be very proud of those advancements. But the reality is that when we talk about revolutionize or pioneering, that simply does not resonate with consumers. So in fact, for some, when we use words like that, it can invoke concerns about the risk because they're newer technologies that are perceived as less tested, and that can really amplify those concerns. Do the risks outweigh the benefits? So instead, we recommend that we really talk about this as a natural evolution of crop improvement, of plant and animal breeding. So we can do that in a way like this. Farmers and scientists have used genetic selection for decades by breeding plants with the desired characteristics. Gene editing is simply the next evolution in improving plants to be hardier, healthier, more nutritious, and environmentally friendly. So we also weave in some of those important benefits at the end. International Seed Federation and American Seed Trade Association have done some really nice resources that kind of talk through these milestones in plant breeding and that evolution over, literally centuries of work to improve soybean and other crops. Our fourth recommendation is to leverage expert spokespeople who are credentialed and relatable. They show integrity and share values. And we just cannot emphasize that need to be relatable and lead with values enough. But when we reviewed that research, nearly all of the studies asked a question something like, who are your trusted sources for information about gene editing and biotech? And we looked for consistent themes and found that consistently science leaders, so folks like Jennifer Doudna, one of the developers, inventors of CRISPR, folks like Bill Nye, the science guy, those science leaders consistently rank high, as do scientists at academic institutions and research institutions. So as we think across US soy, folks like Dr. Ed Anderson working with Iowa and the Midwestern soy research, and at some entities for which USB has supported research. I'm thinking of someone like Dr. Michael Lasner of Amphora, who's been working on some gene edited benefits along with USB. So the voice of scientists and research institutions is really so valuable. We have also found that the voice of the regulatory authorities does, especially with a new technology like that regulatory voice is important in providing some confidence and assurances of trust. The farmer voice is incredibly important, and we see this, across that farmers are surely trusted sources. They're ranking a little lower when we look at this research specifically about trusted sources for technology. And I believe that's because of the newness and that scientist voice comes across so strong. But it would be very important, in our opinion, for soybean farmers to continue to be on the forefront as a voice and a spokesperson. This is how I can use gene editing on my farm to provide these benefits. This is why I'm so excited about gene editing. And then you'll see lower down the list, there's just less credibility for the ag companies that develop the products, the companies and retailers that are selling the food, because that they have a commercial interest. Our fifth recommendation is to share analogies and visuals. So as we said at the start of the webinar, this is simply a science and technology, the whole concept of crop improvement. Many consumers just don't even know that that's been happening. So we do need to make sure that our language is really relatable and understanding without being condescending. So a few tips that we have found to make simple analogies. With gene editing, you can turn genes on and off, similar to a light switch. There was also one organization that did some really interesting work around it to analyze consumer reactions to different communication approaches. And they tested a number of different analogies and found that two analogies really worked best in communicating what gene editing is. And those two analogies are blueprints of the house or an encyclopedia. And let me tell you why I think that both of these work. Because there's a natural skepticism that when we're going to make a change to DNA, does that have a greater effect or unintended consequences? So both the blueprint and the encyclopedia can put this very precise, specific change of the gene editing makes into the context of a larger being with a strong foundation. So for example, like the blueprints to build a house, DNA provides the information for building every living thing. Builders can make small changes to a blueprint, like moving a cabinet or adding a feature, without impacting the foundation. So likewise, scientists can make small, targeted, beneficial changes in a segment of DNA without impacting the entire organism. And for the encyclopedia, think of DNA like a long encyclopedia of information. Scientists can identify the exact page, the exact paragraph, even the exact letter that they want to study. Then they use gene editing tools to make corrections or improvements to that precise area of the genome without changing the other words in the book. Yeah. And it was tested specifically across generations, and this encyclopedia analogy works across generations. So I think about that encyclopedia series in the bookcase of my home growing up, but my teenagers think about Wikipedia and online encyclopedias. So other key takeaways from the research that we've seen: with new technology, the concern about risks can outweigh potential benefits, just reinforcing our need to lead with the why, lead with benefits. Consumers do have more questions about the use of science in animals and if that's acceptable. So our friends in animal agriculture do have some extra challenges as they launch gene editing applications. Gen Zs are much more comfortable with using technologies, as well as millennials to a lesser extent, but those younger generations are definitely more comfortable with using technology to solve food production challenges. So with their increasing purchase power in the marketplace, that's really an opportunity. And finally, and we talked about this with the analogies, describing gene editing in easy to understand terms, focusing on the why and the benefits more than the how, is really going to be key to connecting with this consumer base that simply doesn't understand our legacy of safe and beneficial crop improvement. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jana McGuire here. And again, we invite you to put any questions into the chat, and we'll sure address those as we continue.
Right. Thanks, Amy, and thanks everybody for joining us this morning. Before we dig into the actual resources, I wanted to let you know about a couple of webinars that we conducted earlier in the year that you might find interesting, and we'll send links to these after the webinar, so you can tune in if you'd like. But in March, we conducted a Trust in Gene Editing webinar for farmers and industry leaders, featuring, gene editing 101. What is that? A lot of the information Amy just reviewed on the guide, research on consumer attitudes about gene editing, research-based messages to earn trust. And then in addition, we conducted a webinar just last month where we touched on the trust-earning gene editing principles, but we also covered media training. How do you tackle some of these questions about gene editing and technology, when you have a microphone in front of you, and deliver those trust-based messages, deliver them confidently. And that was actually a three-part training. So 2 parts, a recorded webinar, and then we offered a one-on-one coaching session after that, which obviously those aren't part of the webinar that you would see, but if you're interested, please check those out. We'll send those again in a link following this webinar. So our first resource that we wanted to show you today, this is a gene editing video called Gene Editing in Soy for healthier food and a healthier planet. And as Amy said, you were the first folks to see this, and if I had a drum roll, I'd play it. But we leveraged many of the recommendations that Amy just discussed from the guide in this video. So as you watch this, I want you to kind of keep an ear out for that. Listen to some of the conversation and the script and see where we've incorporated some of those key trust earning messages. But this video is targeted to consumers and food companies to really tout the benefits of gene editing, how they're benefiting people, animals, and the planet. The video features a soybean farmer, a researcher, and then a company that Amy mentioned earlier, Amphora, that's producing a high protein soybean. So I want to take a look at that video and we'll see what you think.
From salad dressings and sauces to the oil for your fried favorites, a better than ever soybean is making a big splash. Thanks to gene editing. It's an evolution of plant breeding that can help farmers preserve our planet and improve our food.
Gene editing is a very precise way of modifying genes within a plant cell. The types of edits that we create are not different than anything you could go out and find in nature.
Through gene editing, we now have a high oleic, heart-healthy oil made from soybeans, the first commercially available gene-edited food product. With 0 trans fats, this odorless, colorless, neutral-flavored oil also has a longer shelf life and performs well under high heat conditions, like baking and frying, making it ideal for cooks in kitchens around the world. Farmers have begun growing high-protein gene-edited soybeans too, helping to meet the growing demand for plant-based foods and improving feed for animals and fish.
We're taking what's already the most efficient source of protein and making it a better source of protein.
The high-protein soybean has a protein content of 50%, and that allows them to create a soybean flour that approaches 65%.
65% is a lot of protein in a flour. So we see our soybean products as a way to make plant-based meats and fish more scalable, more affordable, and more available to everyone. The result is we can produce more protein on fewer acres.
Growing soybeans in a more sustainable way, growing enough food using less land and water, has farmers across the U.S. excited about gene editing.
Advances in technology have allowed us to do more and to produce more using fewer resources. The story of agriculture really is the story of ongoing progress in trying to be better stewards of those resources.
We're actually developing applications for gene editing to protect plants from diseases and stresses like drought.
And producing plants that fight pests and require fewer crop protection products.
It's another tool in our toolbox that we can use to improve our crop plants.
Whether it's growing healthy, abundant crops, caring for the environment, or enhancing our favorite foods, gene-edited soybeans are making waves, and it's just the beginning of great things to come. Want to learn more? Visit Best Food Facts or the United Soybean Board.
All right, I had a couple of comments here. There was just a comment about posting this video on web platforms. Yes, it's ready to go. I'll talk about where these resources are located at the end of the webinar briefly, but hope you enjoyed that video. As you can see, I mean, it didn't really get into the weeds about the technology. It focused on those benefits, to the environment, to people's health. The scientists at Iowa State just kept it very high level, talked about it being, an evolution of plant breeding. It's something that you just simply find in nature as well. So we think that video will really resonate with the consumer and food company audience. The next resource, Meet Gene the Bean. So this is, there are a couple of things here with this campaign. So we have single social media posts, but we also have this infographic here that you see on the right that can be used, just in its entirety to promote. And this will be, we're going to be posting this on our CFI social media channels as well as Best Food Facts, so you can leverage this content in your campaigns. Again, we've designed this so that you can create, you can tell the whole story at once with the infographic, or use individual posts on your social media channels. So the social media posts, again, we pulled out, as you saw the infographic on that last slide, we pulled out each one of those and created promotional copy around those. And they're currently, we're almost finished with those. So we'll have those for you as soon as we can in the resources that we'll compile for you that I'll talk about here in just a minute. But again, those are designed to share on your social channels. We'll be posting those and you can leverage our posts to share on your channels or just use them in your outreach as you see fit. So again, put these resources on your website, share on social and drive back to your website. Provide these to food companies that you have connections with. And certainly share these in your farmer communications and emphasize that you have these great assets that they can use on their channels if they're active on social media to amplify these messages. And the key really is, with gene editing being such a new technology, and as Amy talked about, a lot of people don't even know what it is, but they want to learn more. So the key here to earn trust in this technology and the benefits for soy is to truly communicate these values-based messages early and often. This has to be a consistent, long-term campaign where it's kind of the slow drip on the rock, where people keep hearing about it and all the benefits in a way that earns trust. And that's the way that we can, continue to be successful in innovating, not just in gene editing, but other technologies as well, and earn that consumer acceptance. So all of these assets, after this webinar today, we'll send you an email with a link to a Dropbox that has all of the assets, except Amy, I think the social media posts are still in approval stages, so those will be included later. And then they'll also be on the state and Maine site. And if you have any questions, contact Mindy Rose. She's our project manager at Food Integrity, the Center for Food Integrity, mindy.rose@foodintegrity.org. And then we wanted to remind you that gene editing guide that Amy talked through and provided an overview for earlier, that is not a public facing document. So that's not something you'd want to share. That's kind of inside baseball that talks about, those 5 approaches, talks about the shared values model, and includes a lot of, Amy just touched on a few of those conversation starters. In this guide, there are a lot of different conversation starters and ways to talk about gene editing in a way that research has shown truly earns trust. So now I don't see that we have any questions, but are there any lingering thoughts as we bring this to a close?
And I think those questions or comments would have to be put into the Q&A or the chat due to being on webinar mode with the recording. But we'll hold on just a minute or two if there are thoughts.
All right, we have wowed them, Amy. I think they're still stunned at the video. All right.
So Jana, let's go ahead and launch the polls, and then we can come back to as folks enter some questions.
Okay.
We do have just a couple of questions that we would like you to answer here based on what you've seen. So the first one should be launched now. So overall, how would you rate this webinar? Scale of 1 to 5, 5 being excellent. And I'll watch to see as these come in, and then we'll move on to the second question. Okay. I'll give it just another minute.
Is everybody able to see the poll? If you're having trouble, let us know.
Okay. Question 2. What is the likelihood that you will leverage the content that Jana shared today in your organization's communication plans? It looks like they're all in. So our final question for you, and we do thank you for doing this, what is the likelihood that you will share this information with others within your organization because you think it can be helpful in their work? Okay, well, I think we are all in, and Jana, I do see that there's one question in the Q&A. So thank you so much for answering those poll questions. So a comment here from Mace Thornton, great presentation. I'm sure we will have a number of groups wanting to amplify. So thanks, Mace, for that support, and the USB communication team and others involved with science and technology have been great supporters of this work throughout the year in terms of helping to coordinate the director training that Jana talked about, the webinars provided earlier, and these content assets. So again, we're really appreciative of the leadership that USB has shown as a member of the Gene Editing Coalition, and directing resources to these communication materials here in this fiscal year, and providing support for extended work around the responsible use guidelines in fiscal year 22. So you'll be hearing more from us as we work together to earn trust in gene editing.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, the key really is to engage early and often on this topic and any others. That's how we, earn that trust with the consumer audience. And in this case, the food companies who are looking to solutions to some of their problems, they're, getting lots of, consumers have lots of preferences today in the food that they buy. And so companies are looking to find ways to meet those preferences. And soy certainly is well positioned to help meet some of those demands. And so the key is engaging early and often, sharing these resources and others that earn trust. So, we create this environment where ag and food and technology can truly grow and prosper. So again, we want to thank the United Soybean Board for all their support with everything we've done this past year on the topic of gene editing. If you have any questions, again, reach out to us. We hope you find these resources valuable. And if you'd like to learn more, again, don't hesitate to talk to us, and we'd be happy to help. So I don't see there are any other questions, so we'll call this one a wrap. Thank you very much.